welcome, welcome. I see a lot of beautiful faces in the room, and I know there's a lot of beautiful faces online following us and listening in. So I want to welcome everybody to the United Alliance Disruptive Seekers event. Excited to be here, and I hope you all are excited for it. An amazing, dynamic conversation. We're going to get into a few topics around disruptive seekers and what that means. Again, appreciate everyone's time in terms of showing up. I know getting through the traffic and everything can be a challenge, but we're here. And we know there's some on the way. For the online audience, I thank you as well for taking some time out of your day to join us for this dynamic conversation. We had some questions that we engaged in prior to us even getting started here. And we'll share some of those questions with the online audience as well. But it's to get some thoughts spurring around disruptive seekers and what that is, what that means. We have a panel discussion today. So I'll let the panelists introduce themselves. We'll go down the line, and I'll start with Greg here.
Okay. You just called me, Greg.
Yes.
My name's Greg. Am I supposed to say something interesting about myself?
Anything.
Hey, my name is Greg Schultz. Thank you all for being here today, and it's great to be here. I work with United Alliance. It's 2.5 years now. It's been like a fantastic experience, and I live in Southeast Atlanta. I grew up outside New York City, kind of considered myself an urban boy. Ended up marrying a girl from a farm in Iowa, and yeah, so love to have that diverse experience, but happy to be here.
Awesome, great. I am Brian Taylor, and I'm as disruptive as this orange is against my black suit. I'm one of the co-founders of UA, and looking forward to sharing with you all. And by the way, you all look awesome out there.
Hello everybody, my name is Imani Hines. I'm a licensed professional counselor here in Atlanta. I am the face behind Exalt the Light LLC, and I am a guest here on the panel, and I'm happy to be here and looking forward to having some disruptive conversations.
Awesome. I'm Dion Farrell, also co-founder of United Alliance. I guess my statement is I didn't have enough friends to play with growing up. So I had 5 kids, so I'm just one of the kids. So a lot of fun.
So thank you all. Thank you for introducing yourselves. And to the audience, I want to give a little bit of an overlay how this evening is going to go. We have about an hour's worth of discussion here. We're going to ask some questions to the panelists. I will ask some questions to the panelists. Panelists will engage in some conversation around that question. Then we're going to open it up to you. So we'd like for your engagement in those questions as well. Any comments, any thoughts that you have as we discuss around disruptive seekers. And for our online audience, we have the beautiful Baronessa that is on the computer and is engaging with you. So if you have questions and comments around the topics that we're discussing, we'd love for you to be engaged as well. Type into the chat, and we can bring those questions into the conversation. So let's get started. We'll get right into it. So, Dion, what is a disruptor?
That's a question for me. What is a disruptor? Yours truly. A disruptor is someone that is seeking, I won't use that word, someone that is looking to interrupt the status quo. They're confident enough, they're comfortable enough to go against the grain and do something different. So I would say it's in the space of someone that dares to be different and accepts the role of being different, of standing out. Oftentimes society causes us to conform. And a disruptor is someone that is willing, able, and confident enough not to do what mainstream does, but to find their own lane and operate in that space. To me, that's what a disruptor is.
Brian, would you add anything to that from your perspective? You are a disruptor based on your color pattern and choice today.
Absolutely. There's not much to add to that. I think the thing that, in addition to what he said, not only being willing to disrupt, but also live with what comes from disrupting. So being non-conformist and saying, you know what, it's okay to wear orange with black, versus, white or gray.
Are you suggesting I conform too much tonight, brother?
No, you got the red, no, not at all, not at all. Never that.
Greg, we talked a little bit about this, and here's your thoughts.
I gave Rod some of my answer earlier in the evening, but I think the term disruptor, I kind of chuckle at that term because the first thing I think about is like a teacher in school telling you you're disrupting the class. I always thought of it as being really more of having a negative connotation to it. And so I actually really, honestly, never really thought of myself as a disruptor. But I love to build things. And honestly, that's don't call me for carpentry skills or anything like that. But places that I've been, where I've worked, I wanted to work on things where I could do something new. That would potentially change the way we operated. I've done a lot in my own community building projects. I started a neighborhood festival. So I really like building stuff. And so I really thought of myself in that term, not necessarily being a disruptor, but I think of disruptor or just being disruptive. It seemed like it had a negative connotation for a long time. And now there's tech companies that are disrupting industries, and you kind of hear about that, and now it's like maybe more of a positive thing, but I think the key is really it's actually really a neutral word, and it's about the intentionality with which you go about it. Yeah, you mentioned being willing to go against the grain and changing. And so there's some intentionality in that. And when we get into further in the conversation about disruptive seeker, I think we'll get more into that part of it.
I'll add a little different perspective. I completely agree with each of you. I would say being a disruptor from my perspective is learning how to be comfortable with the uncomfortable. And I think that speaks for itself in some ways. But I think when you think about change, you think about disruption, it is change. It is going against the status quo. But you have to be okay with discomfort to do that. So that's the piece I will add to that.
And if I may add a little bit more, not short on words tonight, but when I think about disruption, I think about growth. And I think about, I do have 5 children, 1 girl, 4 boys, but my younger 2 sons are 14 and then soon to be 13 in a couple of weeks at the end of the month. But my 14-year-old is starting to have a lot of growth pains in his knees and growth plates and all of those types of things. And it's a disruption to his body, but it's because he's grown. Oftentimes, Greg mentioned a lot of times when we think about disruption, there were not negative connotations with that term. But in truth, all growth is a form of disruption. Because growth doesn't happen in comfort. Right? We have a quote that says, if growth is Superman, then comfort is kryptonite. So in that space, in order for us to grow, we have to be disrupted. And think everybody here has some type of connection with self-growth. You invested time to come out tonight or to join us, online, and there's a reason for that. And we hope that something that we say, something that you hear, something that resonates inside of you will lend itself to your own personal growth.
I want to open it up to the audience because we asked some questions at the beginning before we got started here. And a lot of those questions were around disruption that you experienced and some questions in and around that space. I think of a conversation that I was having around disrupting family traditions. Right? And Cassandra, you were talking about it. Alex, Andrew, you all were speaking to some family traditions that you recently disrupted. That we could share.
Well, my wife, she's the one that led the charge, but nevertheless, basically, the tradition that we know to be like just the regular American tradition, and sometimes, personally, we realize, sometimes what's the underlying reason that we are doing these traditions, and with the new level of awareness, by that question, it encouraged us to pivot into more truth. Because you realize there's a lot of traditions that are masqueraded in positivity and all that, but there's some underlying. There's a lot to it.
I was just saying, we just kind of realized like a lot of the traditional holidays that we were told to celebrate, we didn't really know why, and we felt like a lot of them were really rooted in more like consumerism and like we just had pushed to go buy things all the time, and we were going out every single year stressing ourselves out about the gifts and trying to just like, do so much, and we realized like we're not having fun doing this. Like this is actually stressful. It's supposed to be a holiday where we celebrate, and we're like freaking out. Like every November, everyone starts freaking out. So we were just like, you know what? We can just do things our own way. So we started celebrating like biblical feasts instead, and like learning more about them, and like just doing it in a different way, and having family dinners, and like educating like our younger family members. And we realized that we loved it so much more. We felt like it really like built our relationship with God. We got closer to God, and then we were able to just educate ourselves better and just spend a lot more intimate time together without feeling so bombarded with having to spend so much money.
Also, the panel on that, disrupting family traditions.
I think you said it well. I mean, you think about what is the reason why you're getting together, and a lot of it is, you think about it as fun stuff, and honestly, it can be fun. But even, you were kind of mentioning sort of this, it seems so stressful, and it does. You get around Christmas and that kind of stuff, and it seems stressful. But even if it's something that seems pretty good or fairly neutral, even it can be good. But also you can think about does it provide some kind of anchor that's holding somebody back? I was mentioning to these guys, we were having a similar conversation not too long ago. And we go for 2 weeks every year to Iowa because my wife grew up on a farm and the kids get to go and play there. And so that's become a family tradition. Well, this year, I don't know if we're going to go. Our next door neighbors are moving. My daughter's best friends with the girl there, and they're moving right around that time, and she wants to spend time with her. So, we said, we can put off that tradition to next year. We don't have to just go just for the sake of going. But there's like that awareness and understanding of like why you're doing it, and then, is it something that you need to do all the time? And there are, I think you get in spaces where it's a family tradition. You're like, okay, we got to go to Aunt Betty's again, and this is going to be fun, and all of that. So I think it is an interesting thought on disruption and being anchored to something.
So Lloyd, I know the question was disruptor. What is a disruptor? But just interested from, the audience, what is a disruption? Like, let's, for a moment, can we just talk about what does that word or term actually mean?
I think disruption will make you think. Something that kind of flips you off your axis a bit and moves you from going in a circle to like being turned left or right. Something that's not familiar to you. And I think that's what a disruption is. Something that's, like you said, it's not the status quo.
I think it would be kind of to add to what she said. I think like a detour. Like you drive in, taking your regular route to work, and there's like a car accident, so now you have to go different routes. So disruption would be just doing something maybe that you're not used to, that you're not usually doing.
So, I believe that you can't have evolution without disruption, right? So, in life, disruption is inevitable. I believe that if you look at it, no one in here has a floor model TV. No one in here, got here on a horse and buggy. Disruption creates evolution, right? When you look at laws, rights being given, when you look at the emergence of starting a business or entrepreneurship, all these things come from disruption, right? So I think that inevitably a cycle has to be disrupted in order for something new to take hold. If you look at a butterfly, right? A butterfly started as a caterpillar, right? So that mold had to be disrupted for it to be, in essence, beautiful. So these things has to change. I think the last part I'll say is that as humans, we are meant to disrupt. We're called to disrupt. Our gifts is in essence a disruptor. But also, we would destroy our life cycle if we don't become full in our gift to be that disruptor, right? So it's inevitable change to me that will allow us to progress in life.
I believe, I'll ask that question, I'll say, what is disruptive? But my answer didn't really fit disruptive, but it did fit disruption. I really believe disruption is simply awareness, meaning that when you are exposed to a new level of awareness, it can disrupt your old level of thinking. And how often is your old thinking disrupted due to a new level of awareness? And I feel that if your thinking isn't disrupted, then it will reflect stagnation and reflect delay. And I just truly believe that disruption is simply awareness. And the awareness of new thinking is what creates evolution. It's what creates the room we're in right now. Because our mindsets throughout all of our journeys have to be challenged for us to be here today. Not like, oh, I'm not from this. I just wanted to, stay in my same environment. This is a different type of environment, But it all led to a different level of awareness that we have to come out of old thinking to be able to be here and congregate so we can understand one another. So, yes, I really believe disruption is awareness. And how often is your old way of thinking disrupted?
I'll just add something that's very small, but oftentimes whenever I hear disruption, even if it's something personal, professional, it always makes me think of pivoting. Because whenever there's disruption, there's an opportunity to pivot. And usually you don't rest well until you're able to determine which route is they're going to take, because disruption is like a break in a specific route on your journey. So it gives you an opportunity to pivot and determine, okay, well, which route will I take next? What opportunities, and you're just like weighing the options. So small one.
When we think about generations, I look at my parents, I look at my generation, I look at my kids' generation. My husband and I always have these conversations of it's just not the same. But then you get your parents or your grandparents, they didn't allow that disruption to take place. So they have not accepted and embraced that change. And I think about when COVID happened, we had to watch a lot of elderly people learn to embrace technology that we would not have yet. So to the point of pivot, people don't pivot if they don't allow it to take place.
So, we're gonna.
No, I was like, we heard some words in there that I think you
Sure.
can speak to, Dion.
Absolutely. But before I go there, so I would like to interject now. We talked about disruptor and disruption. Well, what is the difference between a distraction versus a disruption? So what is a distraction?
Okay, so distraction is something, so I believe that a disruptor is someone that applies what they've been, exposed to, with a new level of thinking, which can cause a disruption in the condition. I believe a distraction is someone that doesn't take action. So meaning that a disruptor that doesn't execute, then it will in turn follow closely. So when you don't execute, right, you tend to fall into the condition of the system, which is a distraction. But when you challenge the system, you're a disruptor. Okay, so finding my way to articulate it better, but that's what I'm saying. But I believe that distraction is not taking action. Because now you're falling into the condition of the system. But when you become aware of being able to break out the condition, now you are disruptive. So those are the two. That's how I look at it. So sometimes when I feel like someone is stagnating, I know you're falling under the distraction. But when we take action, now you're disruptive.
Well, right.
And I appreciate that. I like to think of it from a personal point of view. When I'm focused on something, I have a goal, distractions come to take my attention away from what I'm doing. But a disruption, it doesn't just take my attention away, it takes my goal away. Now I'm shifting into a different focus because of either intentionality to do that or happenstance or inevitability, right? Something is causing me to have to literally change my motion and change the lane that I'm driving. Okay? A distraction driving down the road would be a nice shiny car that I'm looking at. I'm still going to stay in my lane after I look at that car. But a disruption is a car coming at a full stop in front of me. Now I have to change lanes or I have to come to a stop myself. So that's the way I look at it. Distraction is just something temporary to get you off of your track on what you're focused on, whereas a disruption is a completely different shit.
So by show of hands, like that, Rod and Andrew, by show of hands, how many of us have been distracted? All right. So, Brian, if you can interject on your quote about time.
Oh, yeah, time. So when I think about it, So even a distraction, right? A distraction is a moment in time. However, if we stay focused on it, it becomes a timeless moment. So disruption is also a moment in time, to the point you made, Andrew, and also to what you spoke to, where you have to act on it, and it becomes a timeless moment. So one exists like this, like, that probably distracted somebody, you know, and another one, you all being here is like not a distraction, but a disruption in the way that we talk about. And so now this is going to become a timeless moment as we think about the impact that it could have, Aaron, on our life going forward. So like you said, if a car stops in front of me, I got to pivot, just like Keisha said. So that's what I think about it, being very in tune, aware to not letting a moment in time become a timeless moment, you know. So.
It sounds like we're in church, but you heard something. Ms. Hines, based upon your profession, what you do, can you talk a little bit about, from your perspective, what you see distraction versus disruption and the impact it has on your clientele base?
Distraction versus disruption. So first, everybody has said some really spot on stuff. I'm over here like, that's good. So good. When I think about the mental health profession and what I do, I primarily work with people of color, Black people, women, men, couples, adolescents, and I'm a trauma therapist, so I operate from the lens of let's get to the root. Let's address the real issues. I think about what you said about the generations. And I think about what comes to mind currently is, I feel like this, what I would say, no shade to you all, but I would say the 35, 37 and below, we're disrupting when it comes to mental and emotional health. And not saying that people who are older than us are not disrupting that, but they're learning from us. And that I'm super thankful for, because we are being able to change generational patterns. We are being able to change family histories. We are breaking emotional barriers. We're breaking past traumas. People are no longer being silent about things. We are speaking up about things. And I'm thankful for that, because that is disruption. That is interrupting the status quo, because what has been normalized is, oh, we don't talk about it, sweep it under the rug. How many can raise their hand and say they grew up hearing that somewhere? Yeah. And what we know is secrets, well, we may not know, but what I've learned and what a lot of us continue to learn is secrets keep us sick. And when I say sick, I'm not talking about physical sickness. Physical sickness can come, but it starts mental and emotional. And then it impacts our physicality. So yes, that's the disruption that comes to mind. Those are the things that come, those are the issues that come into my office. And it's functional adults. I think a lot of times we think about mental illness and we think, oh, they're crazy. No, it's not always that. It's the everyday people, like you and I, all of us in this room, who have unaddressed things that we have not tapped into. That we are functioning, we're working, we're workaholics, we're not taking care of ourselves, we're not slowing down. And then we're like, oh, well, why am I having this issue? Why is my head hurting? Or why is my stomach turning? And well, why are my thoughts everywhere? That is a mental and emotional thing. But yet we keep going to work. We keep going to work, we keep parenting, we keep doing all the things. So that is disruption. And I'm a close out, because you see I'm getting a little passionate.
Let's go.
But that's disruption. So when it comes to mental and emotional health, which is the core of who we are.
I love where you went, and I feel like this is a really good segue to one of the questions in the chat. But what makes this meeting, this event so important?
So what's the end of that?
What makes this meeting, event so important?
If I can piggyback on, so I have to apologize in advance. So Dr. Hines is my Imani Hines is my therapist. I refer to her as Dr. Hines, but she's my doctor to me. But nevertheless, what makes it so important is because a lot of people are parading around looking as if they're normal, quote unquote, or we've normalized dysfunction as if we're functional. So the disruption that we're seeking is to unveil the things that are not right, that need to be disrupted, so we can get on and live out of our whole self. And so again, for me, I've had a long journey and just vulnerability. And so I told Imani, you have to fire me. So I see her every week. And again, my role, I'm the leader of this company. And how often are we in positions of leadership when we ourselves have this baggage, or we swept all these things under the rug? So we often talk about the notion of we have an obligation to transform. We have an obligation as individuals to become well. Because if we're not, all we do is we give that dysfunction to other people. You can only give from what is within you. And so if you have these unresolved things, what you do is we pass on these layers of trauma, and they're embedded in our children, in our families, in our places of employment, so on and so forth. And so we've normalized the dysfunction, and we call it functional.
You were kind of talking about that, Andrew, about like as a distraction, just kind of falling into the system and you're just distracted, right? And that's what it is. It's like, we call it the program. It's like you're in the program. We think of that like, standard 95% of the time. And, there may be a little piece of it where, you might have some gleams, rays of light and doing things that, we'll get into seeking here soon, right, Aloy? Where we're like seeking some knowledge and things that we may want to disrupt, but so much of the time we're spending in that program. And the idea is to kind of why is this meeting important is to try to help like wake people up. And like you all are here, right? So you guys have some inclination already in terms of why you are here. But then what's been powerful to me, and I spoke a little bit to this before, but just being with United Alliance is like understanding some of the perspective around it, and Dion calls it the science around it. Like when you start to understand those things and put terms to it that you can understand, it helps you do something about it. It gives you a much clearer perspective. But it's about connecting to your purpose. Like that program is not, you're not connected necessarily to a purpose, you're connected to someone else's system. And it's about trying to get out of that.
I came across it yesterday. Funny. It said distraction is a kiss of death for financial freedom. And when I saw the question, I said, well, that must mean being an instructor and possibly leading for financial freedom. So, yeah.
Right, Keith?
Real quick, in regards to distraction and disruption, I believe that for me, the key to the difference between them is identifying. Because what I found is that sometimes what I thought was a distraction was actually a disruption, right? And so you have to be cognizant to identify and slowing down to be able to identify, to differentiate the two. And that's all I want to say.
That's it.
Very profound. So I know we need to transition. Keisha, you mentioned pivot. And Brian talked about moment in time becoming a timeless moment. And let's try to say this so we can move on. The challenge is, as Brian said, when we allow distractions to be permanent. And we get stuck in that loop of what was only intended to be temporary, and it becomes permanent. Where to us, the disruptions are intended as pivots. And I'll drop one more teaser in that space. And you talked about acting, taking action on that. And a lot of individuals talked about taking action, disrupting, doing something different, stepping outside of the status quo. Well, when you're in tune, Keith, to your point, and you can differentiate the difference between a distraction and a disruption, and then you're bold enough to take the corresponding action, we then believe that pivot point, Keisha, moves or translates from a pivot point to a portal. So we actually can time travel to the life we're supposed to have versus the life we settled for. Back to you, boy.
Drop that in.
I have a lot of questions, Dion. Greg, you took it there, we'll go there, in terms of what is a seeker, you know, in terms of that question itself, but, you know, I thought about that question in terms of, it's a simple question, what's a seeker? Okay, they're seeking to do something. Disruptive seeker, well, what does that mean? Are they seeking disruption? I thought disruption was bad. We talked about a lot of good context, though, around disruption just now. So what is a seeker? What are we seeking?
I'm putting myself on a word for it.
Go ahead, Brian.
What are
Right
we
behind
seeking? What are we seeking? That's a great question. Well, first let's talk about a seeker. A seeker is somebody that's looking for something that they don't believe they actually possess, right? Or a seeker is looking for something that's lost in them. Maybe they possessed it at one time, and now they're looking to possess it again. And so when you think about a disruptive seeker, when I think about a disruptive seeker, I think about somebody looking to find their self, disrupt the autopilot that they have going on, find themselves, and seeking something that they know exists within, or something that they know that's out there that's better for them, pivot point or portal. And so I'll use myself as an example. I disrupted myself because I was seeking to be around when my daughter got married, my son got married. You know, I've said it a lot, but nobody in the crowd will know this, but I've lost probably about 110 pounds. So I had to disrupt me. You know, I had to disrupt when I was telling myself about food, because food is comfort. I had to disrupt that. And then I had to say, you know what, I can do something different. And so even in that space, it's about seeking something beyond. And I would dare say, a lot of things we seek exist in visions. Like, I used to visualize myself like light, you know, and not in color, but definitely in weight. And I accomplished it. But you have to first disrupt what you're doing. You have to get off of that autopilot, and then you have to seek something better than what you have. So that's what I think about using myself in that space as a disruptive seeker, looking for something better, and realizing that you need something better, and seeking it, and then aligning to it, and really doing it. But I won't go all the way down that rabbit hole, because there are other parts to it too. But just
I love that. Brian, you're talking about a very active statement, you know, in terms of, you know, seeking where.
I'll add something to that. I want to piggyback off of what you shared, and then going back to my initial statement about disruption, I feel like it kind of plays into seeking as well, that statement of learning to be comfortable with discomfort. And a lot of words have been stated, but when I think about discomfort and uncomfortability, that's agitation, right? It's to get you to move, it's to get you to evolve, it's to get you to be aware, if you use it that way, though. Because it could be a distraction to go back to old habits, or it could be a disruption to say, I need to make some changes. But you have to be willing to seek out support. You got to be willing to seek out the answers. You got to be willing to go the places you need to go, have the conversations you need to have. You got to be willing to talk to people that you probably wouldn't normally be comfortable talking with. That's seeking. When I think about seeking overall, it goes back to, I think you mentioned it, Brian, authenticity, like learning who you are. Who are you? That was one of the questions from today. I think Jerry had that question, and he asked me, I said, whoa, I'm stuck. Hold on, let me think. What question would I ask? What's the one question I would ask someone if that was the only question I could ask? And I think that was it. Was that the question?
Change the trajectory of the person.
Yeah, change the trajectory of someone's life. What's the one question? And I said, I would ask, who are you? Because most people, you ask them that, they're going to give you the surface and authentic, materialized answer. They're not going to tell you who they truly are at the root, at the core, authentically. And I think that is what we have to seek for before we can seek outside of ourselves.
Right. Let's say, as you think about Disruptive Seeker, they are both action-oriented. And reflecting on seeking or seeker, I think about it as seeking knowledge, like you mentioned, like who are you? There's like I think about it as like an inner reflection almost, in terms of like you're seeking knowledge, you're seeking to learn something. And then the disruptor part of it is how you're going to apply it. Like there's a certain, there's a certain intentionality again about how are you going to apply once you have that knowledge, what are you going to do with it? And then, bringing it all back, around to once you are a disruptive seeker, if you are connected to a purpose, like who you are, and you're connected to a purpose, then it's really powerful, in terms of going out and seeking the change and transforming. And as Keith, you were talking about, that you need to like it's evolution, but it's both action oriented, but they both those words complement each other in terms of how you apply them.
Can I add something?
Oh,
Go ahead. Okay. I was just going to add something because it made me think about a conversation I was having about purpose. And I think typically we think about purpose as going after something, trying to find ourselves, what are we here for, what do we call for? And the person said, purpose is who you are. You are purpose. When I think about, you think about the term being worthy, right? A lot of people struggle with their worth and their worthiness. Am I worthy? Do I deserve? Do I have to fight to get these things? Do I have to earn these things? But understanding that you are purpose. When you wake up, you're purpose. When you put your feet on the ground, you're purpose. When you walk out the door, you're purpose. When you come into these spaces, you're purpose. So when we learn to operate like that, you're not chasing anything. You're just showing up.
So you're gonna make me go there. So I was considering that we're dressing up disruption and seeking, but everyone raised their hand that we've all been distracted. Right? That's real. That's honest. The question I want to pose to the community is, why aren't you? Why haven't you been a disruptive seeker? And I want to sit with that just for a moment to really ponder. If we surveyed or asked everyone in the room, I would be very surprised if the vast majority, if not all of us, would acknowledge the fact that there are things that we desire in our life that have not occurred yet. Why? We all agreed to show up to an event called Disruptive Seekers. So what part of our current state, our existence, is preventing us from having the life we desire?
So when I think about disruptive, like things that have disrupted, or have gotten in the way of me being a disruptor, I used to work in corporate America. In corporate America, being a disruptor sometimes is seen as you are bringing something that they don't live like. Now we're comfortable with the status quo. What you're bringing to the table is not something that we're comfortable with. Even though the vision,
disruption will probably be lucrative and can probably help you and push you a lot further. It's something that we are not comfortable seeing because we don't know what that looks like. And so our safety net is staying with what we're doing. And so if I relate that to where I am today, and how do I get to where I want to, like, what keeps me alive sometimes is like, hey, how much risk do I want to put out there? How much do I want to expose myself to? And what do I want to do? So like, hey, I have some money. Do I want to throw caution to the wind and say, I'm going to invest everything in this thing that, hey, it could potentially take me to where I want to go to, but it could also leave me on the streets. So it's always that, I guess, you're managing risk. And I think that's where, when I think about disruption, I think of what keeps me in control. I think to me, it's a measure of risk. How much risk do you want to take in terms of being a disruptor? That's kind of what I think about when I say, what kind of holds me at bay from being 100% just straight up disrupting everything, just going after it.
So if I may, I love that, Sam, thank you. When I think about risk as it pertains to our lives, oftentimes we use risk, I'm not saying you do, but I've used risk as a means of procrastination or not to take the necessary steps. We justify via our comfort the notion of staying where we are, staying stagnant. And Imani mentioned this value piece. When I self-reflect, oftentimes I sabotaged myself because there was a question of value. Am I really deserving of the life I desire? And if my value's in question, the fact of the matter is I will not take what seems to be a risk. But the funny thing is, the moment I started accepting my value, what I once deemed as a risk was no longer a risk. It was the only way. It was the only thing. And so I realized, what if I got that epiphany years before? So to the question we got from the online community, why is this so important? It's how much do you value yourself? Because if you truly value yourself, it demands and necessitates different actions. We all walk around, everyone looks well put together. We talk about success, and we talked about earlier functional dysfunction. But at the end of the day, many of us don't acknowledge, recognize, or we're in a constant disruption inside of us where we're unsettled of what our own value is. So we don't go after the life that we were purposed to do because it seems unsafe. And then one other comment, we'll come back to you, Sam. We were talking, as we consider life, and we talked about this internally, our team this week. I've never gone to a school that promoted me to find my purpose. So is it a risk for me to go after my purpose? Or is it easier for them to tell me to stay in the system and conform?
I think that's literally probably what I was going with. I think, again, when me leaving corporate America in 2019, I retired from corporate America. And I remember having a conversation right before I was getting ready to retire. And I was having a conversation with my mother, and she was like, whoa, retire? First of all, you're too young to retire. You have this great job. You make 6 figures. What are you thinking about? Again, in her perspective, listen, I had made more money than both my parents combined up to that point. I was my annual salary, it was solid. But I also recognized I was not getting my true worth, and I wasn't going to get to where I am today. And so me leaving the company, I understood my value and how I could kind of push myself to another level. But again, your family, they'll put those things out there hey, are you sure that's what you want to do? And I remember the person I was in a relationship with at the time was like, well, baby, I don't know about that right there. Are we sure we want to do that? And all those different things, hold on, we're good right now. And I'm like, listen, trust me, I think I have another vision. I know I can take it somewhere else. But I just need everybody just to hold on for a little bit. It might be rocky for a few years, but I promise you on the backside, it's going to be a lot better for us all in the long run.
Well, just a quick comment. You kind of brought us to corporate America. corporate America, like businesses, we're talking a lot of it. Like I think we talk about this as individuals and kind of what it means to us. Corporate America operates in with a lot of these same ways. They're made up of people. They kind of have these same thoughts, and so as an organization, we've actually addressed these issues with clients, like in these same ways. I mean, we kind of we tailor it to the business world, but we bring it to them in terms of identifying their purpose. We talk about how people and companies are really bad at developing strategy because they're not really connected to a purpose. You don't know where you're going, how do you even know how to get there? And so it's all about getting there. And so that's actually what we do. We're actually, we sit up here, and three of us, and we're in a profit-based company ourselves, right? But it's these principles that are universal. So, but sometimes, when you talk about disruption, there's probably someone that's not going to like it, or, your growth, someone may not like your growth. And a lot of times they're actually, because they don't know where, they don't know their own purpose, they're going to hold you back from yours. And so there's a lot of that. And so you do, if that's a big move to get away, to leave the corporate world, and a really big move. Sometimes it's about navigating through and trying to influence from inside, and that's okay as well. Or sometimes you have to make a bigger move to leave, because that's how you're going to get there. But it operates in the business world, just as much.
So, addressing the question, why haven't you sought out, your purpose or whatever, right? So, and I think also coincide with what is a seeker. When I came to Atlanta, I was just enjoying Atlanta. And these older ladies will pass me by every once in a while. I'm having a great time. They pass me by and said, God's going to restore what the cankerworm stole from you. And it will happen every 18 months. And I'm I started thinking, hold on, what did the cankerworm steal from me? Seriously, I started seeking that. Because this got to mean something, every 18 months. So, I moved down here when I was 28, 29, 30. And I'm hold on, what did the cankerworm steal from me? I kind of I had a rough life, but I made it okay. And so what I started seeking was that, right? And inadvertently. And I said, okay, what was taken away from me? And then I started talking, and then you start talking about soul body ties. And then I started thinking about my grandfather. And I tell everyone my grandfather was a loan shark. And I admired my grandfather. He taught me. I said, to me, he was one of the smartest guys I ever knew. He had a third grade education. He couldn't read, but he was very articulate. And I said, why do I admire this man so much? And I started seeing what was stolen from him. And I started realizing my grandfather picked cotton. He was a Marine. He had a hard life. Some people didn't like him. He was very edgy. And I said, well, what about him that do I have? Right? And I started seeing those soul body ties. And what I identified was because he didn't deal with the soul body ties before him, it actually stagnated him from becoming who he was or what he could have been. And when the church Sunday, the pastor was saying, you should be greater than what your father was, or you should accomplish what your father didn't accomplish, right? And so I was like, man, maybe I'm acting, and inadvertently that changed my life, right? And I tell everybody, I didn't want to become an entrepreneur, right? I didn't want to go into, Wall Street. I didn't want to do the things I'm doing right now. It was my passion. I love fashion, right? I love clothing lines, right? And so it changed me, being from Harlem, I like to dress, nice, right? That was my thing. I was comfortable. And so here I have a responsibility of other people's lives and payroll and things of that nature. And so I've become my grandfather, what he was supposed to become. And I'm breaking each and every day, I'm identifying things that I need to break off that left him where he was. So I've been seeking that. And and what I've understood, the last thing I'll say, the one thing I've understood or understand is that it's never a finished job. So I'm still doing it.
I really appreciate that comment. And you talked about the school system, and Greg, you talked about the program. And as I'm sitting listening to everyone and thinking about a seeker, and to me, a seeker is someone the program doesn't work for. And so when it doesn't work for them, they have to find something that works for them. I have 4 children, all of mine are homeschooled. We never put them in school. It's uncomfortable to go to talk to another mom or another parent to explain that because you get questions like, are they going to be antisocial? Or, are they going to be underdeveloped socially? Are they going to have everything they need? So it's uncomfortable. It's very uncomfortable. And the risk is high because you don't know if it's going to work until 18 years later, and 20 plus years later. But sometimes the program doesn't work. Sometimes the program doesn't work, and it's okay when it doesn't work. It's okay to see until it finds something.
I just want to speak to the risk part. I love what you said. I love what you said too, Keith, in terms of it's continuous, And even when I think about disruption versus distraction, disruption is something you continues. Like we could be disrupted by day turning into night, but it only lasts for that moment, But the continuous piece, the risk piece that you mentioned, but then also what you said, the uncomfort. So a lot of people live in comfort that's not safe. And then when I think about the risk piece, right? The energy to entertain a risk, what if that energy is put into something being creative? And even if it's just yourself, like you said, Sam, you said, look, it might be bumpy, but man, I can handle this. And then, do we ever entertain, like, who puts that risk there? Like, because when it's there, I don't know who said, like, I have a thing I said to my children all the time, my son crying, I don't know how to do multiplication. Who told you you couldn't? Who said that? And so they don't tell me what they can't do anymore, but in that same space, like, who said it was risky? Well, risk is based on what already existed. Risk is based on the foundation that does not allow disruption, but it actually is a distraction. Because here you sit 3 or 4 years later, like, I'm straight. I'm glad I did it. Same for you. You'll be the same way. You'll be like, oh, I'm glad I homeschooled.
Oh, yeah. All 4 of my daughters are business owners. They think differently. They approach life differently.
Ryan, one of the things I think about there is, I think about the most successful people that I know. And you can look at history, but just I know personally, have been the ones that have seeked disruption constantly. They don't look at risk as a limiting factor to not do something. They are the most, in terms of taking risks, they take the most risks. And they achieve the most value from that.
I'm going to say something that might be controversial, and then I'll be quiet. Well, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I love a lot of what was said, because going from the students to what I think was your father, I think as adults, we have to start identifying that in our children and the young people. You label them special needs. No, they're not special needs. They're disruptors. Yeah. They're taking that risk. They think differently. They do things differently. I tease my sister all the time about my little nephew. We have to pray for this one, but we got to let him be him. He is a total disruptor and is totally accepted. He has so much self-confidence. We as parents and as the society have to stop. Oh, you need to behave. Stop doing this. We have to let that bloom from a young teenager. Yeah, right.
All right, come on.
I like, Brian.
Come on.
I like your point, Brian. It reminded me of discussions we've had. Like, if you're disrupted, that's because
You're tied to a vision. There's a path that you're seeing. There's a vision that you're going after. Persons, when they're talking about risk, that's founded on, and you said it, present, what's happening. No, they can't see what you're going after. And you're building something that's not here, it's not creative. So you can't be limited by the limited beliefs.
That's right.
That's what I thought of when you made a comment. I love your comment, Brian.
Yeah.
So there's 2 questions coming from the chat, and we've spoken a lot to that already. But just to like hone it all the way down. A, from Krista, what are ways that we can nurture and or develop healthy disruptive seeking in our youth?
Great question, because as I heard what she was saying, I literally said that is spot on. And even connects back to honestly what everyone shares when you think about how most of us were raised. You were told, those. I think about my family and my brother. He was a disruptor, right? I was the one that stayed out of the way, like, let me do what I'm supposed to do, But he was highly intelligent. He was musically inclined. He could have conversations with adults as a little boy, and it was like, what's wrong? And it's like, but he needed more, and the schools did not, right? They weren't able to keep up with that, So when you think about why people do that, but people would do things like, stop talking so much. Why do you want to read those books? And that happens to so many children. I used to work in the schools as a counselor, and it would frustrate me to my core when they would label these children ADHD and whatever they can pin on you, not realizing, hey, let's tap into what we can create in the community to get them out of these homes that are unfortunately unhealthy and creating these behaviors. These children are coming in hungry, and you're telling them to be quiet. If you're hungry as an adult, are you going to be quiet? You know what it's like to be hangry, right? But that is what they do in schools, right? And it's like you're missing the basic needs that these children need. So when you think about nurturing, it's about creating environments, schools, homes first, that allow children to be children, that teach them skills, helping them understand their emotions, their feelings, how to express themselves. I tell my friends, I don't have children yet, but I tell my friends who do, they call me and like, listen, why don't you, she's trying to tell you something. When children behave, that's how they communicate. Don't look at the behavior as like, oh, that child is acting out. Are they acting out, or are you missing something? Tap in, get down to their level. If they're 2, why are you yelling at them up here? And why are you yelling? Get down to them and say, hey, give them options, give them choices, help them understand. So I would say the key is helping them become functional adults. But you got to become a functional adult to help them become a functional adult.
I would say quickly, one of the best things you can do is you can learn from the children.
Yep.
Right? A big part of what we do is, and Dion and Brian talk about it all the time, is we want to get people to learn to use their imaginations again. So when you become adults, you actually stop using your imaginations, and children naturally do that. And that's what they need to do is learn from the kids and encourage that behavior.
Yeah, we have a few.
So I think the key, because it was like, how would you as a parent can help your child to be? I think you have to be that first.
Yes, absolutely.
So because as we mentioned, like the environment you as a parent grew up in molded you. So if you don't want to pass that on, then you have to first disrupt yourself and seek that new way of thinking, being, doing. So I think it starts with us, and that's like a space I'm actively in. Like when my son says certain things, I'm conscious about, okay, how am I gonna respond? Like the initial response, or you have to think about this and reimagine kind of response, so that he can foster a different way of thinking and being.
Right there.
You said what causes you not to be disruptive or not to be a disruption. I think it's comfort.
Yeah.
People get comfortable in what they've been doing, and then you spoke about the youth or younger generations. my age, I'm not gonna say it, but we were told to be, you know, something like that around that age. You said, you know, so our age, we learned to be humble, right? So we're not gonna be the one to say, oh, I deserve this. You know, it took me a while to say, oh, because I am that, you know, because I do need this, or I am supposed to have that, but it took me a while to understand that I don't have to be humble. And my daughter is the most bodacious child ever because I taught her to just live out loud. She's 6'2", and she's gonna wear her heels, right? Yeah. She's gonna wear them, and then she's gonna walk hard. You know what I'm saying? Like that's what you. And at 7 years old, she decided to pray in a Bible study. And then when she first got up, I'm like, and I said, no, go ahead. Because I wanted to stop her because I wouldn't do it, right? But she's like, I want to pray. And shut it down too. I'm like, well, go ahead, you know, because we have to learn when somebody is being disruptive to not hold them back. Yeah. You know, like you said, I got this. You know, you have to be the one, you got it. I'm gonna go ahead and let you lead. I'm gonna stand behind you and have you have it, you know? Yeah. So that's what it is, like going away from what we've been taught, you know, stop being stagnant and humble and safe and comfortable. You have to understand it's gonna be uncomfortable, you know? It's not gonna be as smooth as it was in corporate America, making 6 figures. It's not gonna be that. So you have to be willing to be uncomfortable, be willing to have looks and things that you may get because you're just doing something that's different.
Robin has a comment. And not getting over here, Robin.
I like what's your name?
Terry
Said about people being in their comfort zone, and that's why they don't disrupt, right? And I also like what she said about when someone says you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that, because that's what they feel limited by. So I just think that people should respect, they can, you know, take that leap and do what you know is your purpose, but also respect other people's disruption as well.
You know, did you start off by asking the room what's the reason why we maybe not have the desire that we want?
Yes.
Before taking into that. So I realized for myself, the reason why I don't have certain desires that I want is because I'm still a committed person to sustain those desires. I can't tell you how many times I told God, like, thank you for delaying certain desires.
Absolutely.
Because I didn't become the person to sustain it, you know. And my wife and I were watching Gladiator a couple weeks ago, and when the emperor died, he wanted his army guy to be emperor, but he died before he could make set in stone, so his son became the emperor of Rome and lost the whole kingdom because he didn't become the person to sustain ruling the kingdom. And I realized just for myself, a lot of desires that I don't have today is because I know that I'm still becoming the person to be able to sustain them.
Yes.
And it kind of helps me calm myself down because I tend to be very destructive in my self-destructive. God, what did I do next? But I know that there's still things I need to tweak. Just mental adjustment I need to tweak and to do so that I can sustain the desires that I want. Because you know, to my perspective, they're too high, and so that requires a higher level of diligence, intention, and wisdom to be able to sustain them. So I can multiply them and not squander it. So that's just
So you shared a tremendous amount of wisdom. Go ahead, man.
So what I was gonna say as far as why not, why we don't go out and be destructive or not. So I gotta bring this kind of like to my life. So I'm a menswear consultant, so I help guys with their style and stuff like that. earlier this year, I had this idea, this video idea, where I was gonna, basically just a video of me literally in front of a coffee shop in a suit, and I was drinking like coffee, right? And I was putting text on the screen, and what I put on the screen was dressing like a Ralph Lauren man in a world full of Nike tech bulls. And so I created a post, but I was hesitant on posting it because I realized that it was going to be disruptive. So bringing it back to the initial question, I feel like sometimes, and I'm glad we were able to identify the difference between being disruptive and a distraction and things like that is, like, I think at that moment I had to realize that being disruptive is not something that is negative, right? So I went around asking a whole bunch of people before I posted. Usually I post everything willy-nilly, like not even think about it. And people would tell me, nah, it's triggering, I posted it anyways. And it happened to be the most viewed video that I ever posted. And what was funny was I had a bunch of negative comments. People were like saying like, oh, it is whatever. But in a sense, now that we're having this conversation, I'm thinking about it, I'm like, wow, like, so, okay, I was being disruptive and I was embracing the fact that I had a different worldview, right? And to finish off, on top of those negative comments, it was the most viewed video, but I was also able to literally like double my following and also connect with a whole bunch of other disruptors that agree with that.
Real quick, we are, in terms of time, we're at the time that we allotted in terms of 8 o'clock. So I just want to call out, if you need to be insensitive to that. I want to continue the conversation just a few minutes longer. And also, as we're talking, there's a question about disruptive seekers and being a disruptor and being a seeker. And as we have awareness to that, here's a question of, so what, who cares? In other words, why is that important?
Say that so they can.
Now, I was saying, I think that was pretty much answered from what he shared. It's important because it provides opportunities, it makes people uncomfortable, and it can be a blessing, ultimately, being okay with being uncomfortable and making people uncomfortable. I like that. In a positive way.
So I want to come back to a few different things. First, Sam, you were talking about good versus great. Jim Collins, an author of a book, Good to Great, he says good is the enemy to great. When you accept good, you negate greatness. So I want to say that. To the question on the camera, what do you do for the youth? First, I would say you encourage them to be a disruptive seeker. If you yourself, you have to be honest, if you're not modeling the behavior that is disruptive, find someone, find a mentor for that teenager, that youth, that will encourage them, that will challenge them, so that they can accept and lean into who they are and who they're discovering themselves to be. To me, one simple definition of seeker is, or seeking, is a journey to discovery. And you have to discover something that is hidden, that is not in plain sight. So it's a journey to discovery. Andrew, you had mentioned, sometimes you don't have what you desire because you're maturing, you're still developing, you're growing. Learning you're a man of wisdom. Oftentimes, a lot of people aren't in that position. They negate because they don't believe in it, or they're not taking the steps to prepare for what is to come. So I'm grateful as well for times in my life when I desired something that I wasn't ready for and it didn't come. Conversely, I've had times where I attempted to force things to happen that I wasn't prepared for and it was disastrous. To Aloy's point, so what, who cares? We live in a world where we're encouraged to comply. Why does it matter, so what, who cares? because individuals need to see examples. I had, prayed a prayer to God, and the response that I received back was, if you don't show people who I am in your life, how would they ever know? And so it's vitally important that we demonstrate when we have the courage, or you feel this pivot, as you mentioned earlier, Keisha, that we take the necessary steps, because that gives other people license and permission to be courageous, as you did, Manny. And now you inspired a whole nother group or following of individuals or disruptors, as you said. What if you were the key? What if I needed to hear from you? Because they might not receive it from me, but they receive it from you. So if you don't take that action, you might be preventing not only yourself, but generations and families and individuals that they needed you to step out. Baroness, do we have another question from?
Yes, this is from James. My question is, can a disruptive seeker be associated with a calculated risk taker, or does a disruptive seeker mean going completely against the grain and maybe putting all eggs in one basket in order to be 100% focused on a goal?
I'll take it. I'm gonna say something controversial. I didn't think I was gonna get a chance to say it. But risk does not exist. It's a construct we use in our mind that we hold on to. Well, somebody once said, well, if you're in the jungle and there are lions out there, that is a risk. A risk is something that you don't know about. When you go to the jungle, you know it's lions there. So it's not a risk because you know it's a chance there's gonna be lions out there. So when I think about calculated risk and all that, I see those as distractions, and say more. So the Wright brothers got in a plane that they never seen anybody fly. They weren't calculating any risk, and everybody in here benefits from the Wright brothers. And so I don't think it's going willy-nilly to answer his question, James, but I do believe it's really letting go of any anchors that exist in a past way or in a past life or a part of history and that limit your creativity. I'm saying, be strategic, obviously, but don't look at it from a risk perspective, because risk actually, it's a risk to get on the elevator to go downstairs, So, so that's my thought on it. I don't know if anybody want to add to it.
Yeah, I've actually been sitting here thinking about this the entire time when you mentioned risk, and I'm like, is risk, in my mind, I'm like, it's really a perception. Because I think you mentioned that you just kind of jumped out there, and you mentioned something about value, and you mentioned your children and homeschool. And sometimes I think about a risk as simply a challenge. And so, could they be both? Could be interchangeable? Possibly. But what's perceived as a risk to someone else may be nothing to me, or may seem like, well, I'll do it just because we all talked about, like, it's a level of confidence. And when you have someone who operates on, well, there is no plan B, so the risk is little or none for me. But then when you ask someone else, well, I have this to lose and this and all these things that you're naming to lose, but then no one ever really mentions the things that you have to gain.
Right. Well, you have risk when you're unclear as well. Like, that's when I think you start to perceive the risk, because you're like, well, I'm not really sure. Maybe one thing, maybe the other thing, not really which one's going to be better. When you can develop that clarity, like get out of the program, if you're a disruptive seeker, you're seeking something. When you get out of that, when you can develop that clarity, well, then the risk is it's not there. There's risk in not doing it, right? Of our group, I am often referred to as like the pragmatic one, the one who's looking to make it tangible and everything like that. And I understand that. The way to think about it though is to try to identify what that, to get that clarity. We call it definitive clarity of purpose. Like, what is it? And once you know that, then risk is not as much of an element.
Can I say one more thing?
Yeah.
So to the point you made, Keisha, and to the point you made, I didn't get your last name. Cassandra, that you made as a risk homeschooling your kids. But I dare say the risk for doing something that is life transforming is worth it. So much so that you almost negate it. Like, yeah, it might, but this is for my family. This is for a better education. This is for me to go to another level. This is for me to correct something that happened generational. Like, it's only in your mind, like, okay, yeah, but most people use it as a reason not to go forward. You know, when it's an excuse, it's just like, this girl. And we've all done it. We've all done it.
I know we're closing, but I just gotta say, this risk thing is big, especially in my life right now, but I was just sitting there thinking, you know, the life of a caterpillar, Solana mentioned it earlier, you have to go into a cocoon to become a butterfly, right? And there's risk in that. A predator can come eat the cocoon, right? But if you really think about it, the predator could eat the predator, could eat the caterpillar before it gets to the cocoon. It could also eat the caterpillar once it becomes a butterfly. So you can get eaten at each stage. So why not take the opportunity to become a butterfly?
Okay, you done took me somewhere. So in nature, they don't consider risk. That's a great point. A caterpillar in its development is not considering if it's going to get ate.
Right.
All it sees is what it needs to do to become a butterfly. So we are, as humans, the only ones who entertain a risk.
Yeah.
In nature, it's like the trees don't say, well, I'm not going to grow, it might rain on me. They don't even consider it.
Yeah.
They don't consider the ground they're planted in. They don't consider how much sun. They don't consider any of that. But yeah, we're like, well, it's a risk. We're really, you know, why? I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Your point about risk, and also what you mentioned about what's holding you back. So like, a lot of us, and I'm not saying just anyone in general, but a lot of us think risk is a bad thing. It goes both ways, just like consequences, right? So a risk can be a good or a bad thing. The thing is just build onto it and move forward. But a lot of times, a lot of things that hold us back to answer your question is because there were structure that was built in us when we were kids, or what we heard from somebody else, and they look, well, it holds you back so much to where you think it's the norm. You get comfortable in that situation, whether your grandparents or whatever they went through in the past, or parents, uncles, aunts, whatever, installed in you growing up, and then when you had the opportunity to be in your own, it's like, man, I don't know what to do. And like for me, when I joined the military, I had to get away from a lot of situations growing up, just from my side of the family. So the only thing helped me to understand, like, I ain't say it's all great, but they also had good things as well. So long story short, it's just one of those things where you have to surround yourself, not to say you have to have validation from everybody, but it's always good to listen to opinions and to where it can help motivate yourself when you're around positive people. So I think that's part of the reason why, you know, some things takes a long time where you procrastinate or you delay on things where you had installed stuff that you want to do.
So if I may say this, and I do want to be sensitive to the time. Risk, you know, I love where you went, D, and you all have my brother stand up. But risk is doubt that is festering, and it only exists because there's an absence of faith. So risk is us justifying the doubt that we have because there's a lack of faith. Oftentimes, there's no person that's done any great feat that has fully understood what they're doing.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, to accomplish greatness, you have to move, you have to operate in faith, and you don't know all the answers. The answers only come when you start applying and you start moving. So people stay stuck because they want to know all the answers to begin, and it never comes that way. So we masquerade or hide risk as doubt that exists in the absence of faith. And so because we want to remain in that doubt, we then say it's too much risk. So I'm going to pause there. I'm going to turn it over to a lawyer. But we appreciate, oh, I do have one more comment. I'm sorry. And there's safety in the multitude of counsel. So it's very important as we talk about disruptive seekers to identify and become a part of a community that encourages and that helps you in your blind spots. And that's the power of community. So United Alliance, we're all about forming community, and we use the platforms that has been given to us in order to build that community. So each individual here in person who joined in on the live stream, we appreciate you. We invite you to become part of our community because there's safety in the multitude of counsel. When you then associate with individuals that are seeking to disrupt, that are stepping outside of their norm, that then operate in a space of faith, that is where you can grow. For the caterpillar to be successful, the caterpillar has to prepare, and the caterpillar has to be in the right environment. So it's vitally important as us as disruptive seekers that you get connected to the right environment that promotes and encourages your growth. I would like to thank our panelists personally, and then back to you, Mr. Moderator.
Appreciate that, Dion, the way you closed that out. And Brian, you said, the moment in time, that's a timeless moment. We can continue this. We want to continue this. We will continue this conversation here in terms of disruptive seekers. So I do want to point out that in terms of a QR code, the way that you can do that with us, with UA, is connect with us. Here we've got this QR code will take you to some of our social media that's been spoken to, but it'll also connect you with the next series of conversations that we're going to have in this space around disruptive seekers, where we can go deeper and explore the so what, who cares. You know, there's a part of this which we talk about the science around it. And that means there's something that is repeatable in the way that you can do that, to be a disruptive seeker. We're going to go into that space. We're going to dive deeper with those that want to follow into that space. And this is a way to connect. If you click on the QR code, you'll be able to see the different ways you can connect with us, especially for those in the online community as well. So definitely want to thank everybody for the time.
Lloyd, can I prompt Dr. Imani for a moment around collision? And she brought a concept to me of what we do at United Alliance. But can you speak a little bit about the collision before we go?
Sure. So just from my understanding, obviously coming to these and talking with Dion around the United Alliance, it was kind of touched on earlier when you talked about corporate America. Like, this isn't your typical work environment. You know, to be in a space where these type of conversations are being had, where you all can be in a space you're talking about mental, emotional, spiritual health, but you're putting it into the context of business, and you're changing the whole perspective of what that looks like. That doesn't happen. And I'll share with him, like, that is collision, that is disruption. You all are disrupting the norm when it comes to the business world. And I think that has the power to really elevate and make some changes worldwide, if we're being honest about it, because these aren't conversations that are having in a professional business space. So, yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Hines, Imani Hines. But so for me, she inspired me with the term deliberate collision. We exist, United Alliance exists in a space where we create that deliberate collision. We put the mirror in front of you so you can really assess, where am I? And be honest with yourself. You can't be honest with anyone else until you become honest with yourself. one of the things, one of our follow-up actions on June the 8th, we are planning a workshop where we can go deeper into some of our science, some of our principles. And it's called the collision. And it's creating a big idea. And, you know, to find out more, scan the QR code. And again, we would love to have you out. Again, and we'll also have for a virtual audience for people that are not in town and cannot make it. So that's June the 8th. More details, please scan the QR code.
Closing comments?
I know.
Nope.
Thank you.
Thank
I
you.
don't know.